Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Patrika Elise, and I'm here with AI4 to welcome you to today's event. We are so excited for today's content, but just a quick housekeeping item before we jump in. Please make sure to submit your questions using the Q&A feature as opposed to the chat. This helps us organize your questions so that we can answer as many as possible. So thank you again for joining. Please feel free to ask questions, as many as possible, and our team is excited to answer them for you today. So without further ado, I'd like to present the webinar, Cementing ML Success with AI Governance. Let's welcome Diego and Nir to our virtual stage.
Hey everybody, thanks for having us today. Super excited to be chatting with all of you today. Very honored to have Nir here speaking with me. I've known Nir for a couple years now, and he's one of the kind of premier executives in the machine learning space and doing some really interesting stuff. So very excited for him to share his story with us today. And I always like talking about new interesting use cases in machine learning and how this technology, especially operationalizing ML, is really going to be over the next 10 years, the largest return on investment for the modern enterprise. And Nir here has an interesting story because he's going to be talking about a business that you probably would have never imagined is using machine learning the way they are. And really being a modern organization. And so let me start out with some quick introductions. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Diego. I'm going to be the least important and interesting person today. Nir's the star of the show. My name is Diego Oppenheimer. I'm the CEO and founder of Algorithmia. Algorithmia is a machine learning operations platform. We help organizations get machine learning models, and applications operationalized, scaled, and governed. And my background's in data analytics. I've been doing this for many years, and super excited to have Nir here today. Nir, why don't you give yourself it's a big introduction. You've done a lot, but I'll let you give the highlights.
Thank you, Diego. Big expectations. So I will keep it short because I would like to have the discussion with you and also with the audience. So thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for attending the webinar today. My name is Nir Kaldero, and a little bit about me. I started the journey with data science, or well, we didn't call it data science. We call it maybe machine learning, or we did a lot of optimization method. When I joined the Israeli army when I was 18 years old, was long time ago. We used a lot of data and a lot of computational power to figure out how to create defense systems and mechanisms. And we did actually some things that I consider them as wonders, even today. So I got very passionate about data and then pulled my career and education towards that. And today I'm the Chief Data Analytics and AI Officer for Neoris, managing the global practice. We have more than 500 people under this practice. And I'm also heading the global data science team and community at CEMEX, which spans over more than 100 people. So excited to be here and share with you some of the interesting stories of how we basically leverage the tremendous amount of data we have in the business with artificial intelligence technology to get to where we are today.
Great. Well, thanks, Nir, again for having us, and let's get straight into it. So real quick on Algorithmia, we're an enterprise machine learning operations and management platform. Our objective as a company is to empower every organization to achieve their full potential through the use of AI and machine learning. And a big focus, and our focus, is really on ROI. And this is why I love talking to Nir, because I feel like he's obsessively focused on return on investment of machine learning efforts. And it's really about how do you operationalize machine learning? How do you show results for the business, which is the number one important thing. And so our platform helps with that, deploying models, running models, and running them at scale. But let's go to the meat of this here and talk a little bit about the story around it. So we survey every year over 500 executives, practitioners, ML engineers, and we ask them where, what are they struggling with? Why, we've heard over and over again, how hard it is to deploy. And I think there's a little bit of a misconception around deployment of machine learning. It's not a container with an API. Deployment is, how do we actually deploy into an operational process inside an organization? How do we run software powered by machine learning? And when we kind of deep dive into kind of like the big problems that organizations were suffering, and where they were getting the challenges, was really IT governance, security, auditability requirements. Data, where the data was coming from, what data and the sensitivity of it, the systems where the machine learning was going to be running in, the operational effectiveness required around that, and really how a business is going to be depending on these. So over 56% of the respondents were really saying, hey, we're actually struggling with governance, security, and auditability issues of our machine learning efforts. And these kind of tend to be IT problems, right? IT is responsible for governance, security, and audit, scale, agility. And as every piece of software that we build in the future is actually powered in one way or another by machine learning, this has become really at the forefront of the problems of getting into production. One of the second challenges was also explosion on the amount of technologies and different frameworks and AutoML tools, and how do we actually get all of these tools kind of packaged up ready for production. It's not about reducing the amount of tools from an exploration or a build perspective, but actually how do we put a fast path of getting into production? How do we govern over all of this? And then finally, one of the things that is really popping up, and if you follow kind of the news, some big news out of Europe around regulations as well. 67% of organizations that are trying or today using machine learning in their daily operations actually must comply with multiple regulations across the board. So more and more companies being regulated need to be able to provide audit, need to be able to provide compliance. Important to understand, where are they being stuck in terms of getting AI and ML into production, and it's really around these kind of like IT, security, governance, auditability requirements, for machine learning. So we're going to deep dive a little bit into that today, but this is just kind of what the survey of the land looks like. So today we're really in a place where there's a really inefficient machine learning life cycle. And we're seeing like 85% of organizations are struggling to get past the POC, and a lot of this is because it's being started without thinking about the end goal. At the end of the day, if I can't actually productionize my machine learning models and my machine learning pipelines, there's never going to be an ROI. By default, if we don't have a path to production, we're really kind of starting out from a failure state. So we really need to attack this problem to be able, because the true ROI of machine learning is there. Like, there's no doubt about it. So how do we actually start tackling this, some of these percentages? And then the other interesting thing is that over 64% of organizations are saying it takes them over a month or longer to deploy a model. And the concept here to think about is, okay, well, if it takes a month or longer, like, what happens there? There's a month or more that there's no ROI. Right? So if I'm actually catching fraud, if I'm doing pricing optimizations, these are all that time is time that I'm actually not getting return on investment from that. But on top of that, one of the particular things around the world of machine learning is that models decay, data changes. And so I get this compounding effect that not only am I not getting ROI of what I've built because I can't get to production, but on top of that, the model and quality is decaying over time. So it's kind of a double whammy in terms of the problem that we get here. So to kind of frame it and think about it, and most of the audience has probably hit some of these problems before. The reason why the machine learning lifecycle today is extremely inefficient is, we have a stuck in the lab problem. We're building models on laptops, in cloud environments, and training environments. We don't have a path to production because we haven't cleared security, we haven't cleared automation, we haven't cleared deployment. So how are we actually going to get ROI out of these investments if they can never make it out of the data science team? Then we go into this next one, which was a human challenge really, but a very relevant one, which is disconnected teams. We have DevOps teams who own production and IT teams who own the production systems of an organization. They care about security. They care about agility. They care about repeatability. They care about scalability. And they need to be able to put these things in place because they are responsible for the operational systems. On the other side, you have data scientists who are the fastest moving team in software. They iterate extremely quickly. They want to move very fast. They want to be able to understand what works and what doesn't in production environments with real data. How do we actually merge these two things? How can we take care of the concerns of the DevOps and IT teams while giving that flexibility to the data science teams to move quickly? We talk a little bit about technology mismatch, and this is just like the Cambrian explosion of tools. And this is not a bad thing. You know, like I think some people frame this as like this being problematic. I don't believe so. We want the best tool for training, for the best libraries and the base frameworks and the best AutoML tools. Whatever can get you moving faster is the best tool to use. What you want to understand is, okay, how do I get all these technologies to work together? I can't be building one-off production environments for every single tool. That just doesn't scale and it becomes problematic. So how do I actually get my, Java models and Scala models and R models and Python models and built in all these tools all working in an ecosystem is extremely important. The stakeholder buy-in really goes down to that 85% of failure in projects. If and I'll let maybe Nir touch on this during his piece here, but if you can't show results, it's going to be really, really hard to get investment. It's going to be really, really hard to grow teams. It's going to be really, really hard to be able to go continue spending money if you can't actually show the results that you're bringing to the business. And there's a lot of burnt executives out there who are looking at it and being like, well, we've been investing in data science teams or in data acquisition and data cleansing. Where are the results? So being able to tie actual ROI of machine learning efforts to the spend and where the investments are being made has become increasingly more important. And then finally, even in the organizations that have built their deployment mechanisms and their operational mechanisms, over time, what they found is that these have really become unruly and grown. One-off solutions, build it yourself, do it yourself, carry an extreme amount of maintenance over time. And unless you're making a conscious effort of building platform teams that are going to support your deployments and efforts over the next half decade or full decade, and continue growing and investing in people, it's usually a really bad idea to be building one-off systems inside an organization given the amount of technical debt that grows. So all of this is really what drives to an extremely inefficient machine learning lifecycle. And the only reason why this matters is, why do we want efficiency? We want return on investment. We want to drive time to value. This technology and what we can do with data is extremely impressive, and we can change businesses around, but we kind of need to solve these issues in the process. So with that said, I'm going to pass this on to Nir, who's going to tell us a little bit about the CEMEX story and where they are today.
Perfect. Thank you, Diego. Thank you for the introduction. So a little bit about my perspective, and then I will get to some of the CEMEX. This quote very much represents me, and I think it represents kind of like the pillars of successful AI transformation within the enterprise. I truly think that, these three pillars of, your data, the technology, and the people are so important. And I think the interaction between the three of them, and kind of like imagining them as like three different circles, I think the interaction with them is crucial, but the success is in the intersection of these three important elements and three important pillars. So I truly believe that competitive advantage of artificial intelligence exists at the intersection of data technology and people. And you can think about people as people, culture, processes. I think it's a vital step for actually reaching towards the ROI. I also think that, I'm obsessive about the ROI, because I believe that the secret of success for successful AI transformation or deployment within the enterprise lies if you really think about where to apply AI. And if we apply AI where it really matters, there's typically the ROI, and you typically can get into this ROI actually quite quickly. So that's kind of like on that front. To tell you a little bit about CEMEX, Diego, if we can move to the next one. Just in general, it might sound boring to you, but let me tell you how I would say it how sexy is CEMEX in a way from a technology perspective. We are a building and material company that provides high quality products and services to customers and communities really across all 5 continents. We provide, distribute, and sell cement, ready mix, concrete, aggregates in more than 50 countries, have more and maintain trade relationships in more close to 100 nations. We founded more than 100 years ago in 1906. We are the second largest building material company worldwide, but I would say the first, I would say largest building material technology company in the world. We employ more than 40,000 people globally, and we operate more than 50 people. I mean, the story of CEMEX is, you know, maybe in your mind, you will think about us as kind of like the brick and mortar type of company. When I work with Fortune 200 companies in the United States, I mean, I'm still working with Fortune 200 companies, but I always thought about these type of companies are like, oh, these are the brick and mortar, like what they can actually do with data, what technology can, I mean, probably technology for them is like very, very marginal. But once I got to know CEMEX and start working for CEMEX, I discovered that this is completely different than the perspective that we have. I mean, I can tell you that, you know, it feels like working in I mean, we are not a startup, but in an interesting technology company in San Francisco. And I do have the benchmarking experience because I've been living in San Francisco for 10 years. But this is really CEMEX for me. And I think that the story and the journey that we are walking through with this specific, not just digital transformation journey. I think, you know, CEMEX invested already in the past 6, 7, 8 years, a lot of money, tremendous amount of capital into becoming digital, and then specifically in the digital transformation journey, but within the AI specific journey. And I think we do something very, very interesting, and it really helped us literally transform the business, powered by the tremendous amount of data that we have, that we're trying to figure out every day how to monetize, how to capitalize, and how to treat as a strategic asset. With the technology, specifically with cutting edge technology like artificial intelligence, data science, machine learning, and everything in between this, and to figure out how to deploy it at scale. And when I mean at scale, I mean, then Diego, we can talk about the governance and security, we can talk about monitoring, we can talk about, you know, processes through automation. But I want you to think about CEMEX as a technology company, not just a cement company. And I want to share with you some of the, you know, the interesting projects and problems we have, so you can kind of like get a sense of how sophisticated we are in terms of leveraging our data and deploying this technology. I mean, we do many projects around the supply chain, very sophisticated one, that are not just, you know, the recommendation that we hear on the typical one. I mean, we do crazy amount of machine learning optimization method. We create state-of-the-art assets to the business that we can even sell to other cement companies in the world and to other companies that even just own a truck, to really figure out how to optimize the supply chain. We do a lot of things on the commercial side, from smart pricing to how to better negotiate, and to how to really dynamically think about the willingness to pay for the customers when you actually do a price increase, and how you do hyper personalized pricing, how we treat health and safety. I mean, I don't know if you know, but in the cement industry, the building industry, and there is a lot of fatalities, or at least used to. I mean, CEMEX made a huge investment to lower it almost to zero, and now with AI, we aiming to zero. So yes, we made an investment. Yes, we see great results, but let's try to push it to zero. Let's make sure that with this type of technology, we have no harm to our employees. And we do a lot of with image recognition techniques around health and safety. Some project that I'm really proud of. We do a lot of work on the customer experience. So really think about every kind of like aspect around CEMEX, which sounds like the brick and mortar type of company, is powered by data and by artificial intelligence technology. And I think that and we'll dive deep, a little bit deeper into that, into this specific project and journey later on. But maybe we want to talk a little bit some about the challenges, Diego. Um, and then we can continue from there. But I mean, the first thing to say is that, the cement ready mix industry is highly competitive, and the market is very, very responsive. And there's a good and bad in that. I mean, we have to be competitive. We have to also be smart. Just to give you some example, if you think that you can just create a pricing model and deploy it in the market, and let the machine pretty much just provide the results and let the market react to that, you're in dead troubles. You need to really figure out what the economics of the market. I mean, it didn't happen to us, but I read some other stories from other cement companies that try to do pricing optimization and deploy it in the market and completely crush the market. And it was not even possible for them to recover today, to my knowledge. So you really need to think about what you do and how you use the data. Also, this market is highly, highly, highly regulated. That also the regulation is touching the data. So we need to be very sensitive of what we do and how we use our data. And every small change, specifically things that are touching the market, not internal efficiencies, not the supply chain internally, we are very cautious about that. The other thing is that we are huge. I mean, we work in more than 50 countries. We employ more than 40,000 employees. We have kind of like a canvas type of organization of countries and functions. And we really need to figure out the business alignment. And I think one of the great things that we did at the beginning was to figure out how to apply artificial intelligence where it really matters for the business. And I think this was kind of like the secret for success. I mean, we went out of the lab, and I know that there is still a lot of companies that are developing artificial intelligence technology in the lab, trying to kind of like do the bottom-up approach of smart and talented employees that believe that touching the data, that knows the data, that believe in this power of technology, that wants to show enterprises that they can build product and solutions that they can take the company forward. This is the bottom-up approach, but I think there is a glass ceiling, right? And the glass ceiling is typically the culture, the people, the processes. That, again, one of these pillars that I mentioned to you in the quote before. If there is no top-down approach or support, or at least sponsorship, it's very hard to deploy or apply or even operationalize some sort of artificial intelligence type of product or data science type of product within the enterprise. So getting the organization aligned and trying to figure out, okay, it's not that we're going to do stuff in the lab. We're actually going to kill all the labs that we had, and we're going to develop and invest tremendous amount of time understanding the business needs and the business priorities. And then through an alignment to these priorities and needs, try to figure out what data we currently have and what are some prototypes and data products that we can ship quickly to the business to get into the value. And this is what I call speed to value. So we went through last year to a speed to value type of initiative. And I think we have a slide to show you kind of like a few of the steps that we have been doing and what does it mean. But that's probably the business is one of the most crucial elements and the most important element when we talk about data science, artificial intelligence. I mean, without an aptitude from the business, I don't believe that you can get into the ROI. You can build amazing model, you can have amazing data, but if there's no one accountable, senior enough accountable from the business to help you carry and deploy these type of models in their local jurisdictions, it is impossible to actually make an impact. So this was a huge challenge for us, and it took us some time. It took us a few months to go through all of that, but because we have a CEO that has a lot of aptitude and determination towards technology, and our C-level gave us a lot of support on that. We kind of like rallied the organization around that. We were able to do it quite fast relative to other Fortune 200 companies that I work with. And I think it's proven very successful. The other thing is that over time, we start developing, and then we all of a sudden look around and say, wow, we actually have a lot of models. I mean, if you think about one initiative, under one initiative that you see in the title, probably there is 8, 10, 12, or 14 different models. So okay, the business was hard. The development of the technology was actually quite easy. I mean, we actually use a lot of Neoris for that. Neoris is basically kind of like a daughter company, a worldwide consultancy, and we use the nearshore resources there. It was not expensive to develop this technology, but now thinking about how to productionize and operationalize it was all of a sudden very costly and also very hard. And this is why we started the conversation with Algorithmia to see how we can start monitoring all of these models in productions and how we can reduce any sort of issues, potential issues that we might have in governance, in data drifts, in model drifts, to basically make sure that what we build is actually deployed at scale and serving the business and delivering the value. So obviously the production environment was very important. The scalability was also very important. All of a sudden, what we noticed last year is that, you know, we have a team of people, and all of a sudden, 1/3 of them are just, you know, instead of developing stuff, they are, you know, shift their time towards like operationalizing and maintaining the model. And for me, it was like, whoa, how much money do I need to spend on, you know, all of that? I want these people to actually continue and building and building. I mean, we have typically in a year like around 18 to 21 different initiatives. I need those people to continue building and try to figure out how I can use technology and automation and platform like Algorithmia to basically get into the scalability without eating time for my employees on that. And obviously the governance, I mean, the governance is a well-known by now, hopefully, for enterprises. I mean, if you do mistake in governance, I mean, you are gone. So managing our data security and governance dynamically and efficiently is part of, you know, all this type of journey, because eventually the models gives results and they need to go back to the business and people are touching them. Actually, many people are touching them. So if you don't have the right governance structure and know how to manage data security correctly, that's a huge hole for, you know, for mistakes. So that's some of the challenges that we went through. And, you know, if I can give you just in 1 minute what we did last year, we basically started like, you know, I joined last year. So it was kind of like a fresh start for me, at least. I knew from the past that the business partnership is basically crucial element of the success here. So we spent time exploring the business partnership, fastening the partnership, understanding the business priorities. But again, top level, we talked with the different presidents of the countries and then direct report. We wanted to make sure that they understand that we service them. And we wanted to show them that we have the data and we can quickly build a data product or enhance a service through a data product to make an impact on the business. So we explored this business partnership, we put the business use cases, we looked at a speed to value framework that I will show you in a second what it looks like when we and we prioritize the use cases. So we did all of that. In Q2, we grew a lot. We continued to make investment because we started seeing kind of like, it's funny. I mean, CEMEX has invested in data science almost 3 years. And the dynamic was that, you know, the group always chased after the business. But last year we were able to change it. So all of a sudden, crazy amount of demand came towards us. Why? Simply because there was trust enabled between our group and the business. They really understood that we understand what they are doing, what is their strategic points, what are their initiatives that are most crucial for them. And because of this trust and collaboration, kind of like the game changed. Instead of being chasing after people and begging to people for some data and some money and working kind of like in a lab setting to create some projects, small projects or pilot, all of a sudden the business was in front and behind us. Like, we'll give you the money, we'll give you the sponsorship, we'll give you the accountability. We trust that you understand what we do. And then they basically help us push it forward to the point that we decided that we need to figure out how to enable a smart operating model. We enable the hub and spoke model globally. Hub and spoke, what we call embedded integrated. In some parts we work in an integrated way, in some parts we work in a coordinated way. Specifically depends on the maturity and what is the nature of the task. We created a quick internal academy specifically in process and IT. These are kind of like change agents that work with the different countries, specifically around technology that kind of like create the aptitude, understood the business point, understood where the data, understood the sponsorship required to deploy the project. And we really kind of like, even before we build something, we started thinking about the change management, about, okay, what will happen the day after we deploy a model, even before, after we develop a model, even before we even develop it. And I think it's a crucial point. Then we created the speed to value framework because the business overwhelmed us with requests, and I will show you two in a second. And then basically we prioritize all the initiative based on this framework. And this is the speed to value plan that we work today. The results look very promising. I cannot give you the numbers, but I can tell you that the ROI numbers is in the millions, if not hundreds of millions. Again, we are a $20 billion enterprise. So every small increment is actually a lot of money. And this is basically was the speed to value framework that helped us basically prioritize the different use cases and investment that came towards our global data science team from all the countries. The first one was obviously the sponsorship. We needed the top management support and commitment, for a strong commitment from the business. Here, all our presidents and most of the VPs reporting to them were involved. Our CEO was highly involved in that, not just in support, but also kind of like do this kind of like back and forward between the business and kind of like someone that oversees the entire business to make sure that we really make the investment and prioritize our time accordingly. The second one was really the ROI. What is the potential value? And we spend a lot of time, and there is obviously a lot of methodologies on how to do that, but I can tell you it was not only by looking at data or just by what the business unit is telling us. We basically kind of like went into, after when you submit a PhD, you have to do this kind of like defending. We basically try to kind of like do this back and forward together to try to find out what is the true ROI. And believe me, people slammed us on the right and the left, but we finally got to a number that we are happy with in different methodologies and approaches. And obviously the third element here was the business readiness. And I think that there's a lot of enterprises that forget about that. I think that, we can build amazing models if we have data. But if the business is not really ready, leave the sponsorship and leave the aptitude that they have, but if they're not fully ready mentally, or from a processes perspective, processes you can change over time, but if they're really not ready, and I can give you an example. We do a lot of things with pricing, but every time we're touching some specific element of the pricing that I will not be able to disclose right now, there's some people that say, oh my gosh, like, please no, this will get us into, I don't want to say troubles, but this might be able to negatively affect, let's say, my market. So when you hear something like that, don't go and push to do pricing right now in, hyper personalized and, try to push the technology to the limit. You see the business is not ready. You need to give them the time to do the work to make it happen. So we really need to think deeply about the business readiness. And if the degree where the business readiness is very low, I would say abandon it. You will not get to the ROI. And obviously the fourth and the most intuitive part here is the technical feasibility about the data and the technology that we can actually do that. So throughout these four elements, we basically prioritize all the tremendous amount of requests we got to the business, and we got into the top tier of let's say 18 to 21. We'll see if we were able to push 21 this year type of initiatives to deploy.
So one of the things, Nir, that I've always been impressed by you and your team, which I think is really interesting, was how early you run this team of data scientists and machine learning engineers. You put together the process from the business perspective, but you were thinking about how to industrialize it inside of CEMEX, essentially how to build for scale and how to build for repeatability. And you brought in, which is kind of pretty rare, you brought in kind of like the IT organization really, really early in, right? Because the IT organization was going to be, in charge of the systems, the data access, the compute, the security, and that, thinking about the end goal, I spend a lot of time convincing people that you need to do that early. So maybe maybe you can kind of add in here a little bit of like what, was that, I'm assuming it wasn't luck. You kind of knew what you were doing here in terms of bringing in those organizations early, but like that's not something that a lot of data science teams start with, right? Really understanding like who's going to own the application all the way through and bringing them in as stakeholders super early in and then trying to come for a repeatable process.
Yeah, I mean, luckily we knew each other a little bit before, so I knew what to expect. But yes, I mean, are very careful about the business and the employees, and specifically around everything around, IT security. And the organization is very, very sensitive to that. And I think you can, you know this very, very well. It was clear to me that I need to bring them at the beginning. I mean, don't forget what we did here is like a global deployment, right? So it was not just focused on one country. If it was in one country, maybe it would be much easier. But because of the GDPR and the variations of it in all the countries and continents that we operate, I mean, it was important and a crucial element to bring the IT team to look at things at the very, very beginning. And again, it was IT and our group, right, that we had to basically kind of like get our hands around how we actually deploy that. Not just the platform, but also all the models, right? It's, it's not just that the data is different. It's also we have a lot of restrictions in every market and every continent. So that kind of like the problem multiplied itself.
Yeah.
And again, maybe the message that I want to say is like developing the models is easy and it's also cheap, but the deployment and the maintenance or the operationalizations of the models is not expensive, or at least much more expensive than the development of it. And we really need to think about it even before we develop the models. I mean, I think a lot of enterprises makes the mistake of like, yeah, I will develop this model and then I will try to take care of like, scaling it with IT, with my governance, with how to monitor all of that. I mean, if you don't think about it before you even build the model, I mean, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And the ROI will linger way where they more than what expected.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I talk a lot with executives. You obviously understood it really well, but it's like, at the end of the day, machine learning, it's fantastic at, optimizations and, automated decision making. But you have to go think about the business problem you're applying it to, because there's essentially like, well, what can be the expected ROI, right? Like, if I can actually like improve, my sales by $2 million over a year by spending $80 million on people and data, like that's a pretty bad decision, right? You have to kind of start with the end result and then go solve the technology and the data access. And I like how you frame it, right? Which is the actual development and tooling and building out of the models is not only cheap or getting cheaper, but we're really the problem, especially the human interaction gets really expensive, is at the operational side of it, right? Which is okay when we actually are running our internal systems, which I think is as there. So we're running a little bit up on time here, so I want to kind of open up for kind of get a little bit of a conclusion here. Maybe Nir, you can give your words of wisdom that you've helped so many Fortune 200 companies with, and then we can open up the floor for some questions.
Yeah, maybe one thing to summarize it and also kind of like share a data point. I think Tom Davenport from Harvard, which I like a lot, mentioned that it costs maybe $1 to develop and $100 to deploy and to operationalize and maintain. And this cannot be anymore. I mean, we have to change this paradigm. I mean, this is the reality today in most cases. And we must bring technology and automation to try to kind of like reduce this ratio of investment or cost, between development to deployment. And I think that, a platform like Algorithmia is kind of like a path to solve this kind of like unbalanced cost between the development and the deployment. And yes, we do. I think the observation of $1 to $100 is almost fully correct.
Got it. So one of the questions that came in. So we start talking about the how to implement this from an effectiveness. So I like to think about think about the end game, right? Pretty much every single global 2000 organization is going to have to industrialize their machine learning process. This isn't a one-off thing or a limited initiative. You're going to be seeing data science and machine learning applied to every single part of the business: sales and marketing, logistics, supply chain, R&D. And so how do we actually start building that for scale, and kind of what Nir was talking about? How do we get to a repeatable process, a scalable process, a governed process? We've done this for IT in a lot of cases, right? I mean, like, this is, and so now, obviously machine learning is a little bit different, needs new tools, needs new platforms, but the general idea of being able to provide that observability is really important. So one of the questions that came in, and we'll jump into that, and I think we probably have slightly different answers here near now, but like, one of the questions that came in is, could you provide a bit more information about calculating ROI for ML models? This is a problem I'm currently facing, and I would like to get some insight on how do we actually make those calculations?
Yeah, well, I will not be able to answer all of it now, just for the sake of time. But I mean, each project is a little bit different in the methodology. But maybe if I will choose one project, I will be able to kind of like summarize it. I mean, one of the interesting projects that we did was what we call dynamic overbooking or cancellation. I mean, each one of our plant has a max capacity, and typically, other builders or people that order the cement are making some orders, and then one day before, or even few hours before, there is some sort of cancellation. So what happened eventually is that we are under capacity, and this under capacity is something that we observed for a long time. So we said, okay, how about we now look at machine learning and try to figure out how to overbook a plant, and learn over time kind of like the cancellation ratios that is obviously dynamic, obviously in every market is very, very different, and try to see how we can always max out the capacity in the plan. So what we did is, obviously, again, you always have the data in one way or another. You don't really have to go to full deployment to understand the ROI. Or some people say, oh, you have to do a lot of A/B testing to understand the ROI. I don't fully believe it. I mean, yes, there is part of an assumption that you need to make, but you can calculate the data. So what we basically did is, we observed the level of cancellation we had over time. We understood the gap between the current level of production to the maximum that we have for the plant. We said, okay, if the model will be able to always push the clients smartly to the max capacity, how much more revenue and ROI will be able to bring to the business. So in this case, it was actually very straightforward and very clear. And the model is right now pushing all of our plants globally to a max capacity. And again, this was a problem that the human could not solve efficiently. I mean, we have very, very talented people working in the plant. I mean, these people work there actually 25 years. They know the dynamics very well. But to replicate it globally in all the plants where the market is actually actively changing, the coronavirus changed it completely. So how you actually deal with that when you don't have a planner that actually went through coronavirus before? Only the machine could do actually that efficiently. So this is just small example, but every project was a little bit different. I mean, I can tell you one important thing is that we took the data approach on one hand, and on the other hand, we went to the business and say, hey, look at the data that you have. Let's ignore what we have, and we had obviously all the comprehensive data, and tell us, what do you think is the ROI for the project based on your deep subject matter experience? And then we kind of like took the boat and did back and forward until we got to a number that we liked. But most of it was driven by data supported by the operations. And I can give you some other example. Feel free to reach out to me afterwards, and I can show you some other example how we calculate the ROI. There is no one project at CEMEX that I approve to start without having a clear sight into the ROI and understanding how the ROI it stands within this speed to value for different elements framework that I told you in the priority level. And if it doesn't hit the priority level, it's not going to be developed. And this is how we went very quickly into the value.
Yeah, and I'll add to that real quick. We're at time here, so we're gonna have to wrap up. I know that Nir and I could talk about this for the next 7 weeks straight if we wanted to. But when looking, I couldn't agree more with Nir. But one way to think about it and kind of framing it is, every analytics project, no matter what it looks, even the BI and machine learning and data science, there's a business metric behind it that is being either, a question, an optimization, something that's being answered. And so the focus really needs to be on that. Like, what is the business metric? Is it a sales target that we're increasing? Is it a retention rate that we're decreasing, that we want to increase? Is it a fraud system that we want to reduce? The models in itself, from an RI perspective, by themselves don't have it, right? It's the delivery, right? What the application looks like, what that pipeline looks like. And so really focusing from the beginning, it's not about, one model is not going to have an ROI. It's the result of that model and how you deploy it and run it and operationalize it that is going to have the ROI. And so thinking about that metric and getting buy-in. And this is also, like, honestly, if you can answer the question of what that metric is, it is so much easier to get executive buy-in, right? Because you're talking the language of those executives. Anyway, we are up on time here. Nir, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. It's always a pleasure chatting and learning about the business here. So thank you, everybody. If you want to contact us, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. We're happy to connect. Thank you so much today.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. We really appreciate these insights, and I know this virtual audience is going wild with applause. We really appreciate you both sharing with us today. To the audience, thank you so much for joining us and asking questions. We appreciate you, and we look forward to hosting another event soon. So please stay in touch with the AI4 team as well as with Diego and Nir, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.
Bye.